I'm Ethan, I'm 22, and my own father tried to leverage my entire future, my education, everything I'd worked for, just to ensure I was a smiling prop at my sister's wedding. It was the last move of a chess game he didn't even know he was losing. Before I tell you about the moment a single white envelope detonated a lifetime of lies, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how stories like this can connect people from all over the world. Now let's get right to it. The place was called Oakwood Manor, and it was as pretentious as it sounds. The grand hall was a cathedral of wealth. Sunlight streamed through two-story windows, glinting off crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the cloying scent of thousands of white lilies and the faint, sharp tang of expensive champagne. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine. The marble floors, the dark mahogany bar, even the gleaming silverware being laid out by staff in crisp black uniforms. I did a quick, bitter calculation in my head. The flower arrangements alone probably cost more than my last 2 semesters of tuition. The real tuition, the one I had actually paid for. I stood near the arched entrance, a ghost in a navy blue suit, watching the guests arrive. They were my father's people, business associates, country club members, neighbors from the wealthy side of town. They moved with an easy confidence, their laughter a little too loud, their handshakes a little too firm. They were all playing a part in the grand production of the Miller family success story. And then I saw the director of this play, my father, Richard. He was a force of nature in a custom-tailored tuxedo. He moved through the crowd not just as the host, but as the king surveying his domain. A booming laugh here, a firm clap on the back there. His smile was a brilliant, predatory thing, all teeth and no warmth. When his eyes finally landed on me, that brilliant smile faltered, tightening at the edges like a rubber band stretched too thin. He broke away from a conversation and strode towards me, his patent leather shoes clicking an aggressive rhythm against the marble. It was the sound of an impending lecture. "Ethan, you made it," he said, his voice low and laced with menace. "For a minute there, I thought you were going to choose to be stupid." I kept my hands in my pockets to stop them from shaking. "You made your terms perfectly clear, Dad." "Good," he grunted, his eyes doing a quick, critical sweep of my appearance. He frowned at my suit. "Is that the best you could do? You look like you're here for an internship interview. Now, for God's sake, try to look like you belong here. Mingle. Your mother is already on edge. The last thing she needs is you moping in a corner, embarrassing us." He reached out to aggressively adjust my tie, a gesture of ownership, not affection. I took a half step back, causing his hand to fall away. "Don't." His eyes, the same shade of blue as mine but colder, narrowed into slits. The mask of the charming host fell away, revealing the tyrant underneath. "What did you just say to me?" "I said don't," I repeated. My voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket, my fingers closing around the crisp, cool rectangle of the envelope. Felt like a shield. "There's something else I need to do first. I think you should see this before the ceremony." I held it out. It was a simple, clean gesture that seemed to throw him off balance. He stared at the envelope, then at my face, suspicion warring with irritation in his expression. He finally snatched it from my hand. "What in God's name is this? A last-minute wedding card with $5 in it? A bill for the gas it took you to get here?" He started to rip it open with a frustrated tearing sound. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs, but I forced my expression to remain placid. I had visualized this moment 1,000 times, playing it over and over in the dark hours of the morning before my coffee shop shift. I watched his eyes scan the contents. I saw the exact instant his smug certainty began to crumble. His brow furrowed. His gaze flickered from the paper to my face and back again. The angry flush in his cheeks receded, leaving his skin a sickly, pale gray. His mouth fell open, and he made a small, choking sound. For the first time in my 22 years, I saw my father look completely and utterly lost. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a ghost, a glitch in his perfectly managed reality. But to understand the weapon I had just handed him, you need to understand the war I had been fighting alone for 4 years. And for that, we have to go back. Back to the phone call that lit the fuse. For weeks before the wedding, my world was a small, cluttered apartment that smelled of stale coffee and microwave ramen. It wasn't much, but it was my bunker, my fortress of solitude. My desk was a battlefield of papers, thermodynamic charts, structural analysis equations, drafts for my final thesis on sustainable urban water systems. I was in the home stretch, the final, grueling lap of a 4-year marathon. My phone buzzed on the desk, rattling against a half-empty mug. The screen lit up with 2 words that always managed to send a jolt of anxiety through my system. Dad calling. I stared at it, letting it vibrate, the noise an angry insect in the quiet room. Every call from him was a strategic maneuver, a probe to find a weakness, a demand disguised as a conversation. I took a deep breath, the way you do before diving into cold water, and answered. Hello, Ethan. His voice was a cannon blast. No preamble, no how are you. Your mother is planning the seating chart for the wedding, and she tells me you still haven't RSVP'd. What's the problem? I leaned back in my creaky desk chair, the springs groaning in protest. I've been buried in work, Dad. Final projects, my thesis. It was a partial lie. I had already defended my thesis. I had already accepted a job offer. But in their world, I was still the struggling student, a dependent, and it was a useful cover. Don't give me that buried in work garbage, he snapped, the impatience clear in his voice. I worked 60 hours a week while I was your age, and I still made time for family obligations. This is your only sister's wedding. It is a major event. I have clients flying in from Chicago. Your mother's cousin is coming all the way from Florida. This is about family, about our reputation. You will be there. It's not optional. The familiar knot of resentment, a hot, tight ball in my stomach, cinched itself tighter. I don't know if I can make it, I said, my voice strained. It's a long drive and I have shifts at the coffee shop. I can't afford to miss them. I heard a short, derisive laugh from his end. The coffee shop? Ethan, don't be pathetic. Your tips for a weekend couldn't even cover the valet parking at the venue. You will take the time off. I can't, I repeated, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the phone. And that's when he unsheathed his favorite weapon, the one he'd polished and sharpened for 4 years. You can't afford not to, he said, his voice dropping into a low, menacing tone. Let's have a little reminder about that fancy engineering degree you're getting. That very generous college fund I set up for you. The final tuition payment for your last semester is due soon. It would be a catastrophic shame if, due to some unforeseen family discord, that payment just happened to get lost in the mail. The threat was so blatant, so shamelessly manipulative, that it almost took my breath away. It was his checkmate move, the one he always used to force me to fold. He used it to get me to come home for Christmas when I had a chance to earn double-time pay. He used it to get me to have dinner with a client's lovely daughter. He used it to demand I get a more respectable haircut. That college fund was his puppet strings, and I was expected to dance. The injustice of it all, the sheer, glaring hypocrisy, was a physical thing. Felt like acid rising in my throat. I wanted to scream at him, to unload 4 years of truth in one blistering tirade. But not yet. An engineer doesn't act on impulse. An engineer waits for the right moment, the point of maximum leverage. The silence on the line stretched, and he, as always, mistook my silence for surrender. Good, he said, his voice returning to its usual smug, commanding tone. I'll tell your mother you've seen the light. The ceremony is at 4 p.m. Be there by 3:30. And for the love of God, wear a real suit, not that thing you wore to your grandfather's funeral. He hung up. He always hung up first. I slammed the phone down onto the cluttered desk. My thesis papers fluttered to the floor. The memory he'd triggered, the one about my grandfather's funeral, was a deliberate, cruel jab. But it was the science fair memory that surfaced first. I was 15. My project was a multi-stage filtration system for gray water reclamation. I had built it myself in our garage, spending weeks soldering pipes and testing substrate levels. It actually worked. I won first place at the state level. My teacher, Mr. Albright, had shaken my hand and told me I had a real gift. I'd practically floated home, carrying this ridiculously oversized blue ribbon. I found my parents in the kitchen, getting ready to go out. "I won," I'd announced, holding up the ribbon. My father glanced up from tying his shoe. "Won what?" "The science fair. First place in the state." "Ha! Good job, son," he'd said, his attention already back on his shoe. My mother, applying lipstick in the reflection of the microwave door, had simply said, "That's wonderful, dear. Don't forget to take out the trash before you go to bed. We're going to be late for Chloe's dance recital." They left, and I stood there in the silent kitchen, holding a ribbon that suddenly felt like a cheap, flimsy piece of plastic. My achievement was a minor errand to be noted before the main event. And the main event was always Chloe. The biggest lie my father ever told wasn't that he was proud of me. It was that he was paying for my education. The so-called college fund was a masterpiece of financial fiction. They paid for my first semester. That was it. One single payment of $12,350. I knew the number by heart because I'd etched it into my brain as the price of the leash they held. When the bill for the second semester arrived, I brought it to my dad. He was in his home office, a grand room with leather chairs and dark wood shelves, looking over stock reports. He didn't even look up when I put the paper on his desk. "What's this?" he'd asked. "The tuition bill for the spring semester," I said. "It's due in 3 weeks." He'd finally looked up, an annoyed expression on his face, as if I were interrupting something vitally important. "Right? Okay, I'll take care of it." But he didn't. A week passed, then another. The deadline loomed, threatening late fees and deregistration. I went to him again, my stomach churning with anxiety. This time he put on a show. He sighed, a deep, world-weary sound, and took off his reading glasses. "Ethan, look," he'd said, adopting his man-to-man tone that always preceded a lecture. "Your sister's sorority fees were astronomical this year, and we had that unexpected plumbing issue. Things are a bit tight. I need you to be a team player here. Can't you get one of those student loans? It's good for you. Builds character. We'll help you pay it back after you graduate, of course." Of course. So I went to the financial aid office. I can still remember the shame, the feeling of failure as I sat in that little cubicle, filling out forms that laid bare my family's supposed inability to help me. I took out federal loans. I applied for every grant and scholarship I could find. I won a merit scholarship from the engineering department that covered a third of my tuition each year. I never told them about it. It was my secret. It was the first piece of my life that was truly mine, unburdened by their generosity. And I worked. My God, I worked like a machine. My life became a color-coded schedule of interlocking obligations, a frantic race to stay afloat. 4:30 a.m., alarm. 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., the daily grind. The campus coffee shop. I learned to hate the smell of coffee. I learned to spot the decaf drinkers and the extra shot zombies. I learned to smile while my feet were screaming and a customer was yelling at me because his soy latte was lukewarm. 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Classes. I'd run from the shop, splash water on my face in a bathroom, and try to transform from a barista into a scholar. I'd sit in the back of lectures, scribbling notes, fighting off waves of exhaustion. 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Library shift. Shelving books in the quiet, dusty stacks. It was monotonous, but it was another paycheck. This was my time to cram a sandwich and review my notes. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Tutoring. I would sit in a study lounge with freshmen who were struggling with the same physics and calculus problems I had mastered years ago. This was my best-paying gig, the one that covered my food and rent. I'd stumble back to my apartment after 10, my brain buzzing with caffeine and differential equations. I'd study until my vision blurred, then crash for 4, maybe 5 hours before the alarm would shriek and the cycle would begin anew. One night, my old, beat-up car decided it had had enough. The transmission died in the middle of a busy intersection. It was a terrifying, grinding noise, followed by silence. The repair cost $700. It was every penny I had in my bank account, money I had saved for food and books for the next month. I didn't call my dad for help. I couldn't bear the lecture, the "I told you so" about buying a used car. So I fixed it. I ate nothing but ramen noodles and peanut butter for 3 weeks. I walked an extra 2 miles to my tutoring job. I never told a soul except my roommate, Liam. Liam was my anchor. He was a history major who thought my engineering textbooks were a form of ancient scripture. He was the one who saw the reality of my life. He'd seen me come in from a shift, pale with exhaustion. He'd heard the stilted, demanding phone calls from my parents. "This is insane, you know that?" he said after my dad's ultimatum call about the wedding. He was sitting on our lumpy couch, a textbook on the Civil War open on his lap. "It's not just that they're not helping you. It's that they're actively using the help they're not giving as a weapon against you. It's twisted, man. It's like something out of a Dickens novel. It's just the way they are." I mumbled, a weak defense I'd used my whole life. "No," Liam said, closing his book and looking me straight in the eye. "It's not just the way they are. It's wrong. And you're graduating. You have that job offer. You don't have to play their game anymore. You hold all the cards now, Ethan. You just have to decide when to play them." He was right. The game was over. It was time to flip the table. The days following that phone call were different. The usual cloud of resentment and anxiety that hung over me had dissipated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. My father thought he had delivered a checkmate, but he had actually just exposed his king. He had no idea I was holding a queen, a rook, and 2 bishops, ready to sweep his pieces off the board. My plan wasn't born from a single flash of inspiration. It crystallized slowly, formed from 4 years of quiet calculation. I wasn't going to have a screaming match. That was their style, not mine. I wasn't going to send a bitter, multi-page letter. They'd just dismiss it as youthful drama. My response had to be as cold, hard, and undeniable as a mathematical proof. It had to be a transaction. The next morning, I walked to the University Credit Union. It was a modest, friendly place, a world away from the cold, marble-floored bank where my father kept his accounts and charmed the managers. I knew the tellers here by name. I was a regular, depositing my crumpled cash earnings from the tutoring gigs every Friday. I stood in line, my heart a steady, determined beat. For a second, a flicker of doubt. What if you're making a huge mistake? What if you're destroying your family for good? The thought was a ghost from my past, the voice of the boy who just wanted his dad to be proud of him. Then I remembered my grandfather's funeral 2 years prior. My father had insisted I drive 3 hours home from school in the middle of midterms to be a pallbearer. I'd done it. I'd worn my only suit, the cheap one I'd bought for scholarship interviews. At the reception, my father had pulled me aside, not to thank me, but to berate me. "That suit is an embarrassment, Ethan," he'd hissed. "You look like you're applying for a job at a gas station. You're representing this family. Have some respect." The memory solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. When it was my turn, I walked up to Brenda, a teller with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Morning, Ethan," she said. "Another deposit?" "Something different today, Brenda," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I need a cashier's check." "Sure thing," she said, pulling out a form. "Who is it for?" I took a breath. "Richard Miller." Saying his full name felt formal, distant. "Correct. And the amount?" $12,350, I said. The number felt sacred. It was the exact price of my indenture. Brenda's eyebrows raised slightly. It was a lot of money for a college student to be moving around. But she just nodded professionally. "All right, let me just get that processed for you." As I waited, I looked at my account balance on the small screen. Thanks to the signing bonus from Thornberry Systems and months of aggressive saving, the number was solid. It was my foundation, my escape route, my future. Brenda returned with the check. It was a crisp, light blue piece of paper, full of official-looking text. Felt heavier than it should. Felt like a verdict. Back in my apartment, I sat down at my desk. I pushed aside my engineering textbooks and took out a single sheet of heavyweight, cream-colored paper. It was from a box I'd bought for cover letters and resumes. It was the paper of a professional. I uncapped my best pen, the one I reserved for signing important documents. I didn't pour out my heart. I didn't list every slight, every injustice. I stated facts. I built my case, line by line, like an engineer designing a bridge, ensuring every component was sound and could bear the weight of the truth. I wrote, "Dad, enclosed is a cashier's check for $12,350. This is the full and exact amount you paid for my first semester of tuition in the fall of 2021. For the subsequent 4 years, you have consistently and repeatedly used this investment as a tool of coercion. You have threatened my college fund to ensure my compliance on matters both large and small. Consider this notice that your leverage is gone. This debt is repaid in full. Any perceived emotional or familial interest on this loan is hereby canceled by years of your own neglect. My education, my degree, and my future are my own. I earned them. I paid for them through scholarships, loans, and 3 part-time jobs. You have no claim on them, and you have no more power over me. This is the last transaction we will ever have. Ethan." I read it over. It was cold. It was brutal. It was perfect. I folded the letter cleanly, slipped it and the cashier's check into the white envelope, and sealed the flap. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk. It would sit there for the next 4 weeks, a time bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. If my father was the hammer, my mother was the velvet glove. A few days after his call, she launched her own offensive. It was always a coordinated attack, designed to hit me on 2 fronts: intimidation and guilt. Her name appeared on my phone while I was in the middle of making a sad dinner of scrambled eggs. Her calls were always timed for maximum effect, usually when she knew I'd be tired and vulnerable. I let it ring, steeling myself, then answered with a neutral, "Hey, Mom! Ethan, darling." Her voice was a symphony of warmth and affection, a tone she usually reserved for her garden club friends. "I was just thinking about you. All alone up there at school. You must be studying so hard." "I'm managing," I said, spooning my eggs onto a plate. "Oh, I'm sure you are. You're so dedicated," she purred. "Your father told me the good news, that you'll be joining us for Chloe's big day. I'm just thrilled to pieces. It means the world to me, you know, to have my whole family together." I stayed silent, letting her spin her web. "It's just so important," she continued, her voice taking on a slightly more serious, confidential tone. "Appearances matter, Ethan. You're old enough to understand that now. We have to present a united front. You know how people talk." She paused for effect. "I was just on the phone with Martha Claremont. You remember her? Her son David went through that awful, very public divorce last year. She said the holidays have been just unbearable ever since. The empty chair at the table. It just breaks a mother's heart. Family should stick together no matter what." The message was crystal clear, wrapped in a gossipy anecdote. "Defy us, and you will be the empty chair. You will be the reason for my broken heart." It was emotional blackmail polished to a high sheen. "And besides," she went on, her voice brightening again as if she hadn't just delivered a veiled threat, "everyone is so excited to see you. I was telling them all how my brilliant son, the engineer, is doing such amazing things. We are just bursting with pride." The word pride from her lips felt like a lie. Pride, to my mother, was a commodity. It was something to be displayed. She wasn't proud of me, the exhausted student juggling jobs and loans. She was proud of the idea of me, the son with the prestigious degree from a good school. I was a talking point, an accessory to her perfect life, just like her new Lexus or her prize-winning roses. "Chloe has been asking about you non-stop," she added. This was another one of her go-to lies. Chloe and I hadn't had a meaningful conversation in months. Our relationship had devolved into a series of brief, awkward texts on birthdays and holidays. I finally cut in, my eggs getting cold on the plate. Mom, I've got to go. I have a study group waiting for me. Of course, darling. You go be brilliant, she chirped, the picture of the supportive mother. Don't work too hard. We love you. I hung up the phone and a wave of exhaustion washed over me that had nothing to do with my lack of sleep. It was the sheer effort of maintaining my defenses against her. My father's anger was a physical force. You could brace for it. But my mother's manipulation was like a gas, odorless and invisible, seeping into the room until you realized you couldn't breathe. For years, I had been breathing it in, letting it make me feel guilty, selfish, and perpetually indebted. But now I had my own oxygen tank. I could see the gas for what it was, and I was done letting it suffocate me. A week later, just as my defenses were back up, the next wave of the attack came, this time under a flag of truce. My Aunt Carol called. She was my mother's younger sister, and she had always played the role of the cool, understanding aunt. At family holidays, when my father was lecturing me about my grades or my mother was making passive-aggressive comments about my clothes, Aunt Carol would be the one to slide up next to me, a glass of wine in her hand, and whisper, "Just ignore them. You know how they are. How are you really doing, kiddo?" She used the same opening on the phone. "Ethan, it's your favorite aunt," she said, her voice full of forced cheerfulness. "I'm not interrupting anything important, am I?" "Hey, Aunt Carol," I said, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. "No, just reading. What's up?" "Oh, nothing much. I was just talking to your mother, and she mentioned you sounded a little stressed on the phone the other day. I just wanted to call and check in. Make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I said. "Just busy." "I get it," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "That engineering program is no joke. And with the wedding coming up, it's a lot of pressure on everyone. Your dad, he's spending a fortune on this wedding. He wants it to be absolutely perfect for his little girl. He's under a lot of stress." There it was, the pivot, reframing my parents as the victims, the ones under pressure. My stress was a footnote. Theirs was the main story. "I'm sure it'll be a great wedding," I said noncommittally. "I know things can be complicated between you and your dad," she continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a deep secret. "He's a difficult man, but his heart is in the right place, Ethan. All that tough talk, it's just his way of showing he cares. The way he boasts about you, about paying for your education, that's his version of love. He might not be good at saying the words, but he shows it through providing. Some men are just like that." She was a master. She was taking my father's greatest weapon, his financial control, and reframing it as a clumsy expression of love. She was trying to get me to lower my guard, to admit my hurt, to confess that I felt unloved. And every word I said, she would dutifully record and report back to her sister, my mother. I knew this because Liam had witnessed it firsthand. It was during that miserable parents' weekend my sophomore year. Aunt Carol had driven up with my parents. She'd spent 20 minutes with me, asking all the right questions, nodding sympathetically. "You're doing great, Ethan. Don't let them get you down." Later that day, Liam was walking past their hotel room and heard her on the phone through the slightly ajar door. It was my mother on the other end. "He's being so dramatic," Aunt Carol was saying. "You're right, Eleanor. He has no idea how good he has it. He's taking Richard's generosity completely for granted." Liam had called her the family spy ever since. Remembering that betrayal, I gave her nothing. "I appreciate you calling, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice polite but cool. "But I'm okay. Just focused on finishing the semester." "Well, if you ever need to talk, I'm here," she offered, probably sensing she had hit a brick wall. "Just try to be patient with them. Family is everything, Sometimes you just have to be the bigger person." "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Got to run. See you at the wedding." I ended the call and felt a profound sense of isolation. This wasn't just me against my parents. It was me against their entire carefully curated system. A system of enablers and spies who all reinforced the same false narrative. The Millers are a perfect, generous family, and Ethan is the difficult one. It was exhausting, but it was also clarifying. There was no middle ground. There was no negotiating. There was only the clean, sharp break that was waiting in the white envelope in my desk drawer. The night before the wedding was my last night in my apartment. The place was hollowed out, an echo of the life I had lived there. The books were sold, the posters were down, and all my worldly possessions were neatly packed into a dozen cardboard boxes stacked against one wall. The air smelled of cleaning solution and the faint, sad scent of an empty home. My lease was officially up in 1 week, but my life here was already over. My flight to Portland, to my new job, my new life, was in 3 days. I sat on a sleeping bag in the middle of the empty living room floor, eating a final meal of cold pizza directly from the box. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator. This small, cheap apartment had been my refuge. It had been the silent witness to my struggle and my secret successes. It had seen me fall asleep on my textbooks, spill coffee on my keyboard at 3 a.m., and celebrate acing a final exam with a silent fist pump because there was no one else to tell. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of grief, not for the apartment but for the version of my life that was ending. The life of the underdog, the struggler. There was a strange comfort in that struggle. It was hard, but it was simple. Now I was stepping into a new role, professional, a man with a future, and I was about to burn the final bridge to my past. Was it the right thing to do? The voice of doubt, the ghost of the boy who wanted his family's approval, whispered in my ear, "Just go. Smile. Endure it for 1 day. Then you can leave and never look back." Do you really need this confrontation? This drama? As if on cue, my phone, lying on the floor beside me, lit up with an email notification. It wasn't from a family member. The sender was David Thompson, CEO of Thornberry Systems. The subject line was short, Portland Sustainability Project. Your proposal. My heart hammered. This was the big one. The project I was hired for. I had sent him a preliminary proposal a week earlier, a bold, slightly unconventional idea I had developed for my senior thesis. I had been terrified it was too audacious for a new hire. I opened the email. It was even shorter than the subject line. Ethan, I've just finished a thorough review of your proposal for the rainwater reclamation system. It's not just good, it's groundbreaking. Your use of tiered biofiltration is a paradigm shift. It's more efficient, more scalable, and frankly, more elegant than the approach my senior team developed over 6 months. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking I was hoping you'd bring to the firm. I'm attaching some preliminary budget documents. Start familiarizing yourself with them. When you get here on Monday, we're going to hit the ground running. I'm putting you at the head of the reclamation design team. Welcome to Thornberry, son. You've earned it. Best, David Thompson. I read the email. Then I read it again. And a third time. My hands were shaking. Head of the design team. Groundbreaking. You've earned it. These were words of validation so pure, so powerful. They felt like a physical force. This was the respect, the recognition for my hard work and my intellect that I had starved for my entire life. My own father saw my ambition as a flaw, my quiet dedication as antisocial behavior. But this man, this stranger, this respected leader in my chosen field, saw it as a strength. He saw me. All doubt, all grief, all hesitation vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. To go to that wedding and play their game would be a betrayal of the man David Thompson had just recognized. It would be an insult to the person I had fought so hard to become. I stood up, my body buzzing with a new kind of energy. I threw the empty pizza box into the recycling bin. I walked over to the closet and pulled out the suit I had bought with my internship money. It was a simple, well-made Navy suit. It was the armor of a professional. My armor. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to a family obligation. I was going to a hostile takeover of my own life. And I was going to win. The 2-hour drive to Oakwood Manor felt like a journey to a foreign country. I left behind the familiar, gritty landscape of my college town and entered the manicured, unreal world of the wealthy suburbs. Everything was green, pristine, and quiet. It was the kind of quiet that costs a lot of money. When I turned onto the long, winding driveway of the manor, lined with oak trees that were probably older than the country itself. The feeling of unreality intensified. This wasn't a place for real people, it was a movie set, a stage built for a very expensive play. I parked my 2012 Honda Civic, with its faded paint and a persistent dent in the passenger side door, in a line of gleaming German luxury cars. It looked like a donkey in a row of thoroughbreds. I didn't care. I got out, straightened my tie, and felt the solid weight of the envelope in my jacket pocket. It was a comforting presence, a secret weapon. Walking through the massive oak doors into the grand hall was like stepping into a force field of money and expectation. The scent of lilies was a physical assault on the senses. The murmur of polite, meaningless chatter was a low hum beneath the soaring ceilings. I felt dozens of eyes flick over me, appraising, categorizing, and, I was sure, dismissing me. My father's cousin, Susan, a woman with a face so tight from plastic surgery she looked perpetually surprised, was the first to intercept me. She floated over, enveloped me in a cloud of cloying Chanel perfume, and planted 2 dry, precise air kisses near my cheeks. "Ethan, darling," she cooed, her eyes doing a rapid, condescending scan of my suit. "We were all so worried you wouldn't make it." Your mother was beside herself. "I'm here," I said, my voice flat. "Yes, well, better late than never," she said with a tight smile, already looking past me, her eyes scanning the room for a more important guest. "Do try to enjoy yourself. It's a party, after all." A few minutes later, my Uncle Bob, my dad's brother and business partner, cornered me by the bar. He was a large, red-faced man who always smelled of cigars and self-satisfaction. He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. "Ethan, there he is. The boy genius," he boomed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still messing around with those textbooks? When are you going to finish up and get a real job? Your father tells me you're working in some coffee shop." He chuckled, as if this was the funniest joke in the world. "Something like that," I said, refusing to take the bait. "Well, chin up," he said, winking. "Maybe your dad will give you a pity job in the mailroom after you graduate, if you play your cards right." He laughed again and lumbered off toward the bar to get a scotch. I stood there, the anger a hot coil in my gut. This was my family. This was how they saw me. A charity case. A failure. A punchline. They had no idea who I was, what I had accomplished, what I was capable of. They were all reading from the script my father had written for me, and they played their parts beautifully. But they didn't know that today I was bringing my own script, and my character was about to have a major plot twist. I finally escaped the main hall and found a quieter hallway that led to the bridal suite. The door was ajar, and I could hear a flurry of high-pitched voices inside. I peeked in. It was a scene of controlled chaos. Bridesmaids in identical seafoam green dresses were flitting about, adjusting straps and touching up makeup. And in the center of it all, on a gilded armchair, sat my sister, Chloe. She was stunning. The wedding dress was an elaborate creation of satin and lace that must have cost a fortune. Her hair was swept up in a complex arrangement of curls and pearls. A professional makeup artist was putting the final touches on her face. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. A very, very stressed princess. Her smile was a tight, painted-on thing, and her knuckles were white where she gripped the arms of the chair. She saw my reflection in the mirror and her smile faltered. "Ethan, you're here." "I'm here," I confirmed, stepping into the room. The room's temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Her bridesmaids fell silent, their eyes flicking between us. Emily, her maid of honor and queen bee from high school, gave me a look that was a masterclass in condescension. "Chloe, we really need to get your veil on," she said, her voice a syrupy warning. Chloe ignored her for a moment, her eyes doing a critical sweep of my suit. "Is that really what you're wearing?" she asked, a slight frown creasing her perfectly powdered forehead. "It's a little underwhelming, don't you think? Mom is going to have a fit." It wasn't intended as a deep insult. It was just a statement of fact from her universe. A universe where underwhelming was a cardinal sin. It's clean, it fits, and it's paid for, I said with a shrug that I knew would annoy her. Whatever, she sighed, her attention already drifting. Just try to look happy in the family photos. Okay? For me, today is supposed to be perfect. Just then, a man I recognized from photos stepped into the room. Mark, the groom. He was wearing a sharp tuxedo, but his expression was as tense as Chloe's. He walked over to her and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, you doing okay? She leaned into his touch, her facade cracking for just a second. I'm so nervous, she whispered. Mark's eyes met mine over her head. He gave me a small, tired nod. You must be Ethan, he said, walking over and extending a hand. Mark, it's nice to finally meet you properly. I shook his hand. His grip was firm and his eyes were surprisingly direct. There was no judgment in them, no preconceived notion of me as the family disappointment. There was just curiosity, and maybe a hint of sympathy. You too, I said. Congratulations on all this. I gestured vaguely at the opulent chaos. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, it's a lot. He lowered his voice slightly. Your father really went all out. There was a strange edge to his voice when he said it, a note I couldn't quite decipher at the time. He looked from me to Chloe, to the general madness of the room, and for a split second, I saw the expression of a man who was beginning to realize he might have made a terrible mistake. The moment was broken by the arrival of the man himself. My father appeared in the doorway, his face a thundercloud. Chloe, the photographer is waiting. It's almost time. His eyes locked onto me. Ethan, my office. Now. Except there was no office. He just pointed down the hall. Showtime. My father didn't lead me to an office. He dragged me, his fingers digging into my bicep like talons, into a small, claustrophobic alcove tucked behind a grand staircase. It was a space for storing cleaning supplies, and it smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust. The happy, buzzing sound of the party was muffled here, as if we were in a different world. He slammed the door shut, plunging us into dim light. What in the hell do you think you're doing? He hissed, his face just inches from mine. I could smell the scotch on his breath. First, you show up late, dressed like a pauper. Then you ignore my guests. And now I find you in here, upsetting your sister 2 minutes before she walks down the aisle. I was congratulating her, I said, my voice dangerously level. I yanked my arm out of his grasp with a force that surprised both of us. Don't you dare take that tone with me, he snarled, jabbing a finger into my chest. You are here on my dime, living off my generosity, and you will show me some respect. Your only job today is to stand where you're told. Smile when a camera is pointed at you, and keep your mouth shut. Do you understand me? I looked at him, the flushed face, the bulging vein in his temple, the sheer, unadulterated rage of a man whose absolute control was being questioned. And I felt nothing, no fear, no intimidation, just a profound, weary pity. He was a king screaming in an empty castle. Actually, I said, my voice so calm it seemed to unnerve him, I have one final piece of business to attend to. I reached into my jacket, my movements slow and deliberate. I pulled out the white envelope. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. What is that? I saw you with that thing earlier. What are you playing at? I think you should open it, I said, holding it out to him. He snatched it from my hand with a sneer. Is this about money? Are you seriously hitting me up for cash on your sister's wedding day? After everything I have done for your education, the tens of thousands of dollars I have poured into that school, the absolute nerve. His rant was cut short as he tore the envelope open. His movements were jerky and theatrical, meant to display his righteous anger. He pulled out the folded letter and the light blue cashier's check. I watched his face, a fascinating study in collapsing arrogance. First, confusion as his eyes registered the payee, Richard Miller. Then, utter bewilderment as he saw the amount, $12,350. The blustering stopped. The angry color drained from his face, replaced by a pasty, mottled gray. What is this? He stammered. his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. His mind was clearly racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Is this a joke? Where in God's name would you get this kind of money? Just then, the door to the alcove creaked open. It was my mother. She must have seen my father drag me away and had come to play the role of peacemaker. Her face was a mask of strained cheerfulness. Richard, darling, what's going on? The coordinator is asking for you, she said. Then her eyes fell on me. Ethan, please, whatever this is, can it wait? Don't cause a scene. Her eyes then dropped to the check in my father's trembling hand. Her smile froze and then melted away. My God, she breathed, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. $12,000? Ethan, what did you do? Did you get into some kind of gambling debt? Are you in trouble? Her mind, like my father's, was incapable of imagining a scenario where I was anything but a screw-up, a liability. He's not in trouble, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tense air like a razor. I looked from her horrified face to my father's stunned one. And it's not a joke. It's a repayment. My father just shook his head, looking at the check as if it were written in a foreign language. Paying me back? For what? This is insane. This makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, I said, my voice gaining strength. If you'd just read the letter. With fumbling fingers, he unfolded the single sheet of paper. My mother leaned in, her eyes wide, reading over his shoulder. I watched their faces as the words sank in. I saw the shared look of disbelief. I saw the flicker of panic in my mother's eyes. I saw the disbelief on my father's face curdle into a dark, sputtering rage. This is a lie, he finally choked out, the paper shaking violently in his hand. A sick, twisted lie. Is it? I asked, my voice still dangerously quiet. Is it a lie that you haven't paid a penny for my tuition since my first semester? Is it a lie that you've been threatening me with a college fund that doesn't exist? Is it a lie that I'm standing here right now? And then, I delivered the rest of my proof. The parts one hadn't written down. The parts that would serve as the final, irrefutable evidence that their reign was over. That check? I said, my voice echoing slightly in the small, cramped space, is your power. It's the leash you've held me on for 4 years. Every time I questioned you, every time I had my own plans, you yanked it. You threatened to make me a college dropout. You did it so often the threat lost its meaning. But the intent was always there, to remind me who was in control. My father found his voice, a sputtering, enraged bellow. I was teaching you responsibility. I was giving you the greatest gift a father can give, an education. No, I shot back, my own voice finally rising. You were buying my obedience, and you were doing it with money you hadn't even spent. You paid for 1 semester, Dad. 1. I paid for the other 7. I paid for them with scholarships you don't know about, with student loans I'll be paying off for the next 10 years, and with my health, working 3 jobs until I was a walking zombie. I took a deep, shuddering breath and delivered the coup de grace. The reason I was so busy, the reason I haven't been home, is because I was finishing my degree. I graduated 3 weeks ago. Not just graduated. I graduated valedictorian of the School of Engineering, summa cum laude, with a 4.0 GPA. The silence that followed was deafening. It was so complete I could hear the frantic beating of my own heart. My father stared at me, his jaw slack, his face a grotesque mask of shock and disbelief. My mother made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat, as if I had physically struck her. From the now open doorway, a gasp. I glanced over. It was Chloe, in her magnificent white dress, with Mark standing beside her, his hand on her arm. They had obviously come looking for my parents, and they had heard everything. Chloe's face was as white as her dress, her perfectly applied lipstick a slash of color on a canvas of shock. And as for where I got the money for that check, I said, turning my attention back to my father, my voice dropping back to a cold, hard nail of a sound. I got it from my signing bonus. I start my job on Monday, a real job, at Thornberry Systems, one of the top environmental engineering firms in the country. My starting salary is well into the 6 figures. So you see, your threats are meaningless. Your power is an illusion. You have nothing left to hold over my head. The game is over. I'm done. I looked from my father's shattered expression to my mother's tear-streaked face. You wanted me here today to complete the family portrait. The successful father, the elegant mother, the perfect daughter, and the struggling son you so generously support. But the portrait is a lie. This family is a lie. And I will not be a prop in it for one more second. My father finally seemed to reboot, his shock replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. You ungrateful little bastard. Ungrateful. I laughed, and it was a raw, ugly sound. What exactly should I be grateful for? The lies? The manipulation? The years you made me feel like I was a burden? A disappointment? A problem that needed to be managed? No, I'm not ungrateful. I'm just done. I looked past their stricken faces to my sister. Her eyes were filled with a dawning, horrified understanding. For the first time in our lives, the wall between the golden child and the scapegoat had crumbled. I turned my back on them. I walked out of the alcove, past my stunned sister and her husband, and back into the grand hall. I could feel the ripple of awareness as guests noticed the scene. The bride standing pale-faced in a hallway, the father of the bride looking like he'd seen a ghost. Whispers started to flutter like startled birds. I didn't care. I walked, my back straight and my head held high, right through the middle of their perfect party. I pushed open the heavy main doors and stepped out into the clean, cool air of the late afternoon. The sound of the doors swinging shut behind me was the sound of a prison gate closing for the last time. But I was on the outside. That was the moment that changed the entire trajectory of my life, when I finally took back the power they had held over me for so long. Thank you for sticking with me to this point. It means a lot. If this story is resonating with you, please do me a huge favor and like this video and comment the number 1 down below. It's a small thing, but it helps the algorithm show this story to more people who might need to hear it, and it tells me that my experience hasn't been in vain. Your support is what keeps me going. The drive away from Oakwood Manor was an act of pure flight. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to put distance between myself and that place. I got on the interstate and drove, pushing my old car faster than it was probably meant to go. The windows were down, and the roar of the wind filled the car, a chaotic, cleansing sound. It felt like it was scouring the last remnants of their influence from my soul. After an hour of mindless driving, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving a hollow, buzzing exhaustion in its wake. I saw a sign for a state park and, on impulse, took the exit. I followed a winding road up a hill to a scenic overlook. I was the only one there. I got out of the car and walked to the wooden railing. The view was immense. A sprawling valley carpeted in the deep greens of late summer, a silver river snaking through it. The sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, and the sky was a blaze of orange and gold. And then, the emotional dam I had built inside me finally broke. It wasn't a loud, dramatic collapse. It was a silent, gut-wrenching implosion. Relief, so sharp and pure it felt like pain, washed over me. It was followed by a wave of grief so profound it buckled my knees, and I had to grip the railing to stay upright. I had just torched my own family. There was no coming back from that. I had lost them, but the logical, engineering part of my brain immediately countered. You can't lose something you never had. I finally pulled out my phone. It had been vibrating in my pocket for the last hour, a frantic, angry buzzing. The lock screen was a battlefield of notifications. 23 missed calls from Mom, 12 missed calls from Dad, 5 missed calls from Aunt Carol, and a flood of text messages. I scrolled through them, a clinical detachment settling over me. Mom, Ethniel James Miller, you turn this car around right now. Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? You've humiliated us. Mom, Chloe is in tears. Her entire wedding day is ruined because of your selfishness. Mom, I cannot believe, after everything we have given you, this is how you repay us. Mom, you have broken your mother's heart. I hope you're happy. Dad, you made a very big mistake today. Dad, Don't you ever think you can come crawling back to me for anything? Dad, you think you're a big shot with your little job? You're nothing without this family. Dad, you are no longer my son. Aunt Carol, Ethan, honey, please call me. Your mother is hysterical. Whatever happened, we can fix it. Please don't do this to your family. I read every single word. A year ago, these messages would have destroyed me. They would have fed every insecurity, every fear I had about being unlovable and ungrateful. But now, they were just noise, the desperate, flailing attacks of a regime that had been overthrown. Their weapons were useless against me now. Calmly, methodically, I went through my contacts. I found my mother's entry. I pressed the block this caller button. A small, simple action with immense consequences. I did the same for my father, for Aunt Carol, for Aunt Susan, for my Uncle Bob. One by one, I severed the connections, cauterizing the wounds. When I was finished, I turned the phone off completely. The silence that filled the car was no longer empty. It was peaceful. It was mine. I sat in my car and watched the sun set until the sky was a bruised purple, dotted with the first stars. I was alone, in a strange place, with a future that was a complete unknown, and I had never felt more at home. 2 days later, I was in the final stages of clearing out my apartment. The place echoed with every footstep. Most of the boxes were already stacked by the door, ready for the movers I'd hired with my own money. I was taping up the last box, full of old photos and sentimental junk I couldn't bring myself to throw away, when there was a sharp, hesitant knock on the door. I froze. It couldn't be my parents. I was sure they didn't know exactly which apartment was mine. Liam was still out of town. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My stomach did a slow, sick lurch. It was Chloe, and standing a few steps behind her, looking like he would rather be anywhere else on earth, was her new husband, Mark. I opened the door. Chloe didn't say hello. She pushed past me into the barren living room, her eyes, puffy and red-rimmed, darting around at the boxes. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and yoga pants. The fairy tale princess was gone, replaced by a tired, angry-looking young woman. "So you're really doing it," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "You're just running away." "I'm not running away, Chloe," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm moving. It's been planned for months. Don't you dare play innocent with me," she suddenly screamed, whirling to face me, her hands clenched into fists. "You blew up our family. You destroyed my wedding. My one perfect day. Do you have any idea what that was like? Mom crying so hard she had to be sedated. Dad just disappeared. He didn't even come to the reception. He just sat in the car for 3 hours. You did that. All for what? To make some kind of dramatic point." Mark took a step forward, placing a hand on her arm. "Chloe, let's just calm down." "No," she shrugged him off. "I want to hear him say it. I want him to look me in the eye and explain why he hated me enough to ruin my wedding." I looked at her, at the genuine pain and confusion in her eyes, and I realized that, in her world, this really was about her. She had been the sun in our family's solar system for so long that she couldn't comprehend an event that didn't revolve around her. I didn't yell back. I just spoke the truth, my voice tired but firm. "This was never about your wedding, Chloe, and it was never about hating you. It was about me. It was about my life." And then I told her everything, not the angry, condensed version from the alcove, but the long, grinding, exhausting story. I told her about the 4:30 a.m. alarms, the smell of burnt coffee, the transmission on my car dying, the nights I'd get 4 hours of sleep before an exam. I told her about the lies Dad told, about the constant threats, the emotional blackmail from Mom. She listened, her anger slowly deflating, replaced by a dawning, horrified disbelief. "But that's not possible," she stammered when I finished. "Dad, he always complained about your tuition. He showed me the bank statements once, the big withdrawals for your school expenses. Did you ever see where the money went?" I asked gently. "Or did you just see a withdrawal?" I realized then the depth of his deception. He was likely moving money around, creating a paper trail to support his fiction. "And you graduated?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Valedictorian." "I did," I said. I tried to tell them. The call lasted less than a minute before Mom changed the subject to your wedding registry. The fight completely abandoned her. She sank down onto a cardboard box, wrapping her arms around herself. "I didn't know," she said, tears welling in her eyes again. But this time they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of shame. "I swear, Ethan, I had no idea. I thought you were just struggling. I thought you were angry at me for having it easier." "I wasn't angry at you, Chloe," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said all day. "I was angry at them for making it a competition, for making you the winner and me the loser before the game even started." She looked up at me, her face a mess of confusion and dawning guilt. "Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you ever tell me?" The question was honest, and it deserved an honest answer. Because I was tired of fighting for a spot in a family that had already decided I didn't have one. Mark, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. "He shouldn't have had to," he said quietly, looking at his wife. "He shouldn't have had to beg to be seen." Chloe flinched, but she didn't argue. She just sat on the box and cried. The move to Portland was a baptism. I left behind the humid, heavy air of my old life and stepped into the cool, clean atmosphere of the Pacific Northwest. For the first few weeks, I felt like an undercover agent. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for a call, a text, a sign that my old life was going to drag me back. But there was nothing, just a profound, healing silence. My new life was defined by work. Thornberry Systems wasn't just a job. It was a meritocracy. Your last name didn't matter, your father's connections didn't matter. All that mattered was the quality of your ideas and the integrity of your work. And for the first time in my life, I was in an environment where I could succeed just by being myself. The Portland Sustainability Project was an engineer's dream. It was a massive, complex puzzle, and I was given a significant piece of it to solve. As the new head of the reclamation design team, I was leading a small group of brilliant, dedicated people. There was Sarah, a veteran hydrologist with 20 years of experience who treated me not as a kid, but as a colleague. There was Ben, a competitive but fair structural engineer who pushed me to defend every one of my calculations. We weren't just co-workers, we were a team. We would have long, intense whiteboard sessions, arguing passionately about flow rates and material stress tolerances. And afterwards, we'd all go out for beers at a local brewery and argue passionately about sports or movies. It was a revelation. This was what a healthy, functional group of people looked like. There was respect, collaboration, and a shared sense of purpose. It was a family of a sort, a professional family that I had chosen, and that had chosen me. This new sense of belonging made me bolder. My work became more innovative. I was no longer afraid of being shot down. My ideas were met with critical analysis, not dismissive contempt. About 3 months in, our team had a major breakthrough. We presented our final design to the executive board and representatives from the city council. I was the one who led the presentation. I stood at the front of that polished boardroom, in front of the CEO and a dozen powerful, intimidating people, and I felt calm. I knew my work was solid. I had done the calculations. I had run the simulations. I had built the case. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then David Thompson, the CEO, stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the room but looking at me, "what you've just seen is the future. This design is not just an improvement on the current system. It's a revolution. It's more efficient, it's cheaper to implement, and it will set a new national standard for urban sustainability." He turned to me. "Ethan, when I hired you, I saw potential. I was wrong. I completely underestimated you. This is masterful work." The room broke into applause. It wasn't polite, obligatory applause. It was genuine. It was a chorus of respect. And in that moment, I felt a sense of pride so deep and so pure, it almost brought me to my knees. It was a feeling I had spent my entire childhood chasing and never finding. It wasn't given to me. It wasn't a gift. It was something I had built from the ground up with my own mind and my own two hands. After the meeting, Mr. Thompson pulled me aside. "Ethan," he said, a wide grin on his face. "That promotion we talked about? Consider it effective immediately. You're no longer the junior project lead. You're the project manager. The whole reclamation division is yours to run. Your new salary will reflect that. We'll get the paperwork sorted tomorrow." I was stunned. "Sir, thank you." "Don't thank me," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You earned it. Now go celebrate with your team." I walked out of that boardroom feeling 10 feet tall. I had a team. I had a promotion. I had a purpose. I had a life. A life that was completely and utterly mine. A few weeks after my big promotion, I received an email from Mark. The subject line was simple: "Something you should know." My heart gave a little lurch. I still associated any communication from back home with impending drama. "Ethan, I hope this email finds you well. Chloe has been keeping me updated on your success at work. Seriously, man, congratulations. It's amazing to see. I'm writing for a difficult reason. I've been debating whether to tell you this, but Chloe and I agreed that you have a right to the whole truth. Keeping you in the dark is what your parents did, and we don't want to repeat that cycle. Things here have completely unraveled. Your dad's business has officially gone bankrupt. The creditors are circling. It turns out he wasn't just having a tough year. He's been functionally insolvent for the last 5 years. The whole thing was a sham. The lavish lifestyle, the country club, the new cars. It was all funded by a mountain of debt. He took out a second mortgage on the house years ago. He maxed out dozens of credit cards. He even borrowed against his employees' pension fund, which is apparently highly illegal, and there might be a lawyer getting involved from their side. The wedding was his last, desperate gamble. He thought he could land a big investment from one of the guests to bail himself out. It didn't happen. The $20,000 I loaned him was just a drop in an ocean of debt. He lied to me, he lied to Chloe, he lied to everyone. They're losing the house. The bank is foreclosing next month. They're going to have to declare personal bankruptcy. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or to ask you for a single penny. The exact opposite. I'm telling you this so you understand the context for his behavior. He wasn't just a controlling father. He was a drowning man, and he was trying to use you and everyone else around him as a flotation device. It doesn't excuse his actions, but it does explain the desperation behind them. He built a prison of lies, and he's finally trapped inside it. You were the first one to find a way out. Stay well, Mark. I read the email 3 times, each word landing like a hammer blow. Bankrupt, foreclosure, illegal activities. The perfect family I had been so thoroughly excluded from had been a fiction all along. A stage play with crumbling sets and actors who had forgotten their lines. The anger and resentment I expected to feel didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow pity. All those years of feeling inadequate, of feeling like I could never measure up to their standard of success. It turned out their standard was a mirage. I had been chasing a ghost. My father hadn't been a powerful king ruling from a throne of wealth. He had been a terrified man in a cardboard crown, frantically trying to patch the leaks in his sinking paper ship. He hadn't been trying to keep me down because he was strong. He'd been trying to keep me down because he was weak, and my quiet, self-sufficient success was a terrifying reflection of his own failures. It didn't forgive the years of emotional abuse. It didn't erase the hurt, but it stripped him of his power in my memory. He was no longer the towering, intimidating figure of my childhood. He was just a sad, broken man who had sacrificed his own son's well-being for the sake of his ego. The revelation was both devastating and, in a strange way, liberating. The monster I had been fighting my whole life wasn't real. The call came a month later. It was a Tuesday night, and I was at home, sketching out some new design schematics on my tablet. An unknown number from my old area code flashed on the screen. My hand hovered over the decline button, but some morbid curiosity made me answer. "Hello." A choked sob answered me. "Ethan? It's Mom." Her voice was unrecognizable. The polished, melodic tone was gone. replaced by a raw, ragged rasp of pure panic. She must have gotten a new phone or was using a friend's. "Mom," I said, my voice instantly guarded. "What's wrong?" "It's your father," she wept, her words tumbling over each other. "He's in the hospital. He had a heart attack this morning. The doctors are saying it was the stress. The business, the bankruptcy, losing the house, it was all too much. Oh, Ethan, it's a nightmare. We have nothing. We're going to be homeless." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the couch. This was it. The final, desperate move in the game. The guilt bomb. "I'm sorry to hear that he's in the hospital," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I hope he makes a full recovery." "A full recovery to what?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "To nothing? To a one-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood? Ethan, he needs you. I need you. The business, what's left of it. It's a mess. There are outstanding orders, angry clients, legal papers I don't understand. You're so smart, Ethan. You're an engineer. You understand these things. You could come home, just for a few months. You could help us sort through the wreckage. You could save us." The sheer, unmitigated audacity of her request was like a physical blow. After a lifetime of treating me like a second-class citizen, an afterthought, a disappointment, now that their world had burned down, she wanted me, the son she had discarded, to come back and sift through the ashes for them. She wanted me to put my brilliant new career on hold, abandon the life I had fought tooth and nail to build, and return to the wreckage of theirs. For one treacherous second, the old programming, the deeply ingrained instinct of a child who just wants to save his parents, flickered within me. She's your mother. She's in pain. He's your father. He's sick. But then, the new me, the man forged in the fire of those 4 lonely years, stood up and stamped that flicker out. The man who knew his own worth because he had built it from scratch. "No, Mom," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was as solid and unyielding as granite. The weeping on the other end of the line stopped abruptly. What did you say?" she whispered, as if she had misheard. "No," I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "I will not be coming home. I will not be quitting my job. I will not be sorting through the mess that Dad created. But we're your family," she wailed, the tears starting again, this time laced with indignant rage. "You're abandoning us in our time of need. How can you be so cruel? So heartless? Wasn't I your family when I won the state science fair?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Wasn't I your family when I was working 3 jobs to put myself through school? Wasn't I your family when I called to tell you I had graduated top of my class? A family doesn't get to ignore you for 22 years and then demand you come and rescue them when their own bad decisions catch up with them. That's not family. That's a hostage situation." I took a deep breath. "I am truly sorry that Dad is sick, and I'm sorry that you're in this position. But this is not my fire to put out. I have my own life to live now." I hung up the phone before she could respond. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel guilty. I felt a profound, quiet sense of peace. The final chain had been broken. I was truly, finally free. Another 6 months drifted by, and the seasons in Portland began to change. My life settled into a comfortable, rewarding rhythm. My work on the project was groundbreaking, earning my team and me a reputation within the company. I was respected. I was happy. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for most of my life had simply faded away. Then, one rainy Tuesday morning, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was just 4 words. "From your father." My finger hovered over the delete button. My policy of no contact had brought me so much peace. But something made me pause. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a feeling that the story wasn't quite finished. I clicked it open. The email was typed in a simple, unadorned font. There was no blame, no anger, no manipulation. It was the most honest piece of communication he had ever sent me. "Ethan, I'm writing this knowing you have every right to delete it without reading. But I hope you will. Your mother and I are in a small condominium now. It's clean and it's quiet. I sold the remnants of the business for pennies on the dollar. A lawyer is handling the final stages of the bankruptcy. The life we knew is over. It's a strange thing, losing everything you thought defined you. It's like being stripped bare. There's nothing left to hide behind. Lying in that hospital bed, I had a lot of time to think. About the wedding. About your science fair ribbon. About your grandfather's funeral. About all the thousands of times I chose my pride over my son. I was wrong. It's a small sentence for a lifetime of mistakes, but it's the truest one I know. I was a weak, terrified man, and I was so afraid of the world seeing me as a failure that I became one in the only place that truly mattered, in my own home. I demanded respect I hadn't earned, and I ignored the incredible young man who was earning it all on his own, right under my nose. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. That is not my right. I am asking if one day you might be willing to talk. Not as the father who failed and the son who was wronged, but just as two men. I would like very much to hear about the work you are doing. Dad. I leaned back in my chair, the email blurring through a sudden film of tears. The anger I had held for so long was gone, washed away by a wave of something I couldn't quite name. It was the apology I had never believed I would get. A few weeks later, I flew home. I met him at a nondescript diner off the highway. He looked different. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple polo shirt and slacks. He looked older, thinner. The arrogant bluster that had always surrounded him like a force field was gone. He just looked like a man. We sat in a booth and talked for 3 hours. It was awkward at first, but then something shifted. I told him about the reclamation project, about the challenges of managing a team. He listened with a genuine, focused interest I had never seen from him before. He asked smart questions. He told me about his recovery, about learning to live a smaller, quieter life. He apologized again, this time to my face. His voice was thick with emotion, but his eyes were clear. I also met Chloe for coffee. She was different, too. The entitled princess was gone, replaced by a more thoughtful, more sober young woman. She and Mark were weathering the storm. She told me she was taking accounting classes at a community college. I figured someone in this family should know how money actually works, she said with a wry smile. We talked for an hour, really talked, for the first time since we were kids. The trip home wasn't a magical fix. It didn't erase 20 years of hurt, but it was a beginning. It was a foundation, built not on lies and expectations, but on the simple, solid ground of truth. Flying back to Portland, watching the patchwork of the world unfold below, I realized my future was my own. My relationship with my family might one day be a part of it, but it would no longer be the center of it. I was the center of it. My worth wasn't something they could grant or withhold. It was something I had built piece by painful piece, and it was mine to keep. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I believe in the power of sharing our experiences. It shows us we're not alone. I hope it has touched you in some way, or maybe given you a little bit of strength if you're facing your own battles. What do you think? Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your relationship with your family? Please, share your story in the comments below. I truly value reading them. And of course, if you want to hear more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me. Thank you and take care.